Okay, thank you.
After having walked to Rialto, I decided the best option to get to Piazza San Marco was to take the Vaporetto, that is, the water bus, the rest of the way. Being a naive tourist, I of course neglected to look up which dock to pick to go in the correct direction. I decided to just go with the flow, to travel back up to Piazza alla Roma and then travel down the entire length of the Grand Canal to Piazza San Marco. The Grand Canal is the main artery of Venice, its main street if you will. It is along this reverse S shape of a waterway you will find many of the great palazzi of the patricians of old, and many gondolas. Rialto, whose famous bridge we just passed under, was the economic hub of the city, spoken about in the same vein as we might talk about Wall Street today. On the western shore, you will still find the Rialto markets, the Erbaria or produce market, and the long building we're passing is the Fabbriche Nuove. And after it, the Pescaria, or fish market. The comparatively small red Vaporetto is dwarfed by its neighbor, the Fondazione Prada, with a contemporary art collection housed in an 18th century palazzo, and even more impressive Ca' Pesaro coming up houses Venice's modern art museum. It also houses the Museum of Oriental Art on the top floor. The palazzo was originally commissioned by the short-reigned Doge Pesaro in 1659 and was designed by the architect Baldassare Longena. In fact, I'll pass by two other buildings of his going down the canal. The palazzo was completed in 1710 and stayed with the Pesaro family a further 120 years. until, after having changed owners a few times, it got bought by the Bevilacqua family. After her death in 1898, Duchess Bevilacqua La Masa donated the palace and her art collection to the city. Chiesa San Stai, or Sant'Eustachio, with its white rococo facade. Further behind it is the Palazzo Mocenigo. The church houses a tomb for the Mocenigo family and works by Giambattista Tiepolo and Giuseppe Angeli, amongst others. This positively ancient-looking brick building is the Fondaco del Meggio from the 13th century. For much of its history, it served as a millet storage. Meggio is Italian for millet, a type of grain. Venice's Natural History Museum is housed in the Fondaco dei Turchi. This was the residence of Venice's quote-unquote Turkish population, that is, merchants from the Ottoman Empire. This also included Greeks, Armenians and Jews, in addition to actual Turks. The Fondaco housed not only their homes, but also a warehouse and served as a market. Before being given to the Turks in 1621, it had belonged to the Dukes of Ferrara from 1381. My favorite view from the Vaporetto was the seemingly infinitely long side canals popping up from time to time. Now we pass under Ponte dei Scalzi. It connects the Sestiere of San Polo to the railway station. And the dome church coming up is San Simeone Piccolo. Some rarely seen greenery, the Giardini Papadopoli. In my fade out and fade in, you could see the underside of Ponte della Costituzione. It might show up in a later video, I genuinely can't remember if I filmed it, I was not very impressed by it. You might also notice I managed to snag a front seat view. No children or elderly were disadvantaged in this move of mine. I had not been seated since the hotel, and it provided a magnificent vantage to go down the canal. And to our left we see the Santa Lucia railway station. Its current design comes from the winner of a competition held in 1934, but it was only completed in 1952. The Chiesa San Marcuola with its canal-facing campo is pretty rare considering how much of a prime real estate having a canal-facing building is. Speaking of which, coming up with the Red Dock is Ca Vendramin Calegi, home of Venice's casino, as well as the Wagner Museum. The composer died in this very building. The palazzo was commissioned by Andrea Loredan, whose bust I unknowingly photographed at the Museo Corriere the very next day. I liked his hair. He was a popular figure in Venice in his day. He died in the Battle of La Motta during the War of the League of Cambrai, of which I won't go into detail, but can practically be summed up as Venice versus everyone else, at least in the early stages. Now we're practically where we started this episode. It's a very Venice view, with gondolas crossing the Grand Canal. The big building is the Palazzo Grimani, but the smaller yellow palazzo next to it is worth a mention as well, and not only because I like the color yellow. The owners of the building that occupied the site previously was a part of the conspiracy by Baiamonte Tiepolo I mentioned in the last episode. It was torn down due to the stigma. The palazzo on the opposite side of the canal is Palazzo Papadopoli, of the same family whose name also honors the park I passed earlier. Interestingly, the palazzo contains works by Giandomenico Tiepolo and possibly his father Giambattista, who I mentioned as one of the artists in San Stai. Whilst they share name with the prestigious Tiepolo family, they had no pretensions to noble blood. I don't think they were descendants of Baiamonte, but I wouldn't pretend to know for certain. Straight ahead is Università Ca' Foscari, which I passed by multiple times on my stay as it's quite near my hotel. Now we're approaching Care Todico, the second of the buildings designed by Baldassare Longena I passed this day. The Rettodico family bought the palace in 1750 and commissioned none other than Giambattista Tiepolo to decorate it. For having such a history of artists and architects, it's fascinating how often the same people show up again and again. I never visited this museum, but definitely will the next time I'm in Venice. Passing under Ponte dell'Accademia, we start our final stretch of the Grand Canal. The relatively unassuming building to the right houses the Peggy Guggenheim collection. And coming right after are some of the, in my opinion, loveliest looking palazzi on the canal. The first one of these, and my favorite, is Palazzo Dario. It's a feeling I might share with Claude Monet, who did a painting of the palazzo in 1908. The building has somewhat of a reputation as being unlucky, as several owners have met untimely deaths. The big dome we've espied ever since Ponte dell'Accademia is none other than the final building of today's Baldassare Longena trilogy. It's the Basilica di Santa Maria della Salute, or simply La Salute. It was built to commemorate a plague epidemic that struck Venice in 1630 and 31, killing a third of its population. The church was finished in 1687 and is built in a Baroque style. Each year, on the 21st of November, an official holiday in Venice, they celebrate the Festa della Salute. The people cross the canal on a temporary pontoon bridge and march to the church, where they light candles and gondoliers get their oars blessed. It is one of the most eye-catching monuments in the entire city, rivaling even the Basilica San Marco, which will be the focus of next episode. We now leave the Grand Canal and enter the Basino San Marco, where we see the famous campanile and the first glimpse at the Ducal Palace. And a final glimpse of Dogana da Mar, the old customs house of Venice, with the Giudecca in the distance. As I leave the boat, I also leave you for today. The next episode is all about Basilica San Marco and my journey back to the hotel.